Was on the roof installing gutters when I heard my wife plotting on Zoom. She's waiting for my dad to die so she can fake abuse, void the prenup, and run off with my best friend. Joke's on her, Larry was my inside man. 3 weeks later, she was shrieking. I was on a ladder, sweating through my shirt, halfway through installing new gutters on the side of our 2-story house in Knoxville, Tennessee, when I heard it. My wife, Melissa, was inside our bedroom, talking on speaker to her sister Renee. The window was cracked because it was one of those heavy July afternoons where the air feels thick enough to choke on. She probably thought the sound of the power drill would drown her out. She was wrong. At first, it was just background noise, their usual gossip tone, until Renee asked, "So, when are you going to tell him?" And Melissa, my wife of 4 years, laughed and said, "After Henry's dad dies. Once the inheritance hits, I'll get my half before the divorce." I froze, drill in hand. My pulse started pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. She said it so casually, like she was talking about groceries, like she wasn't talking about destroying me while my father was dying. "See, my dad, Frank, has stage 4 lung cancer. He's been given maybe 3 months. He worked his whole damn life at a tire plant and never once complained. He saved. He planned. Between the life insurance, his pension, and the sale of his house, I'm supposed to inherit around $1.3 million. Melissa knows every detail because she was there when I talked to the lawyer. She brought my dad soup. She held my hand in the hospital. She cried with me when the doctor said, "Palliative care." I thought she cared. But through that cracked window, I heard her tell her sister she'd already met with a lawyer, that the prenup my dad insisted on would make things complicated. But her lawyer told her if she could get me to mix the inheritance with marital funds, she might have a claim. If I deposited even $1 into our joint account, she could argue it became ours. Her exact words, "I'll convince him it's better for both of us. He's emotional. He'll listen." Then she laughed again. Renee said, "That's smartless." And then it got worse. Melissa said she's been sleeping with Connor, my best friend since college. The same guy who was best man at our wedding. The same guy who holds my dad's hand at family barbecues and calls him Pops. 8 months. 8 months while I was driving back and forth from Knoxville to Chattanooga every weekend to take care of Dad. 8 months while I was falling apart and she was comforting me in bed, whispering, "We'll get through this together." And Connor? He thinks Melissa's leaving me for him. He thinks once I get my inheritance, she's taking half and moving to New Mexico to start over with him. But that's not her plan. She told Renee, and I swear I can still hear it echo in my head, "Connor's a fool. He's been useful, but once I get paid, I'm gone. I'm not moving anywhere with him." I climbed down from that ladder slow, like if I moved too fast the world would crack open. I didn't storm in. I didn't scream. I packed up my tools, drove to a hardware store parking lot, and just sat there for an hour, staring at nothing, while everything inside me hardened into something sharp and cold. She wasn't just betraying me. She was timing it, counting down the days until my father dies so she could cash out of our marriage. That's when something in me changed. I wasn't broken. I wasn't sad. I was clear, because I realized Melissa wasn't the only one planning something. Now it's my turn, and she's not ready for what's coming. When I met Melissa 5 years ago, I thought she was the kind of woman who made your life quieter, steadier. We met at a friend's cookout in Knoxville, right after I got promoted at the construction company I've worked at since college. She was a graphic designer. Smart, easy to laugh, eyes that could hold a man's attention without her even trying. She told me she loved simple things. Backyard fires, live music, Sunday mornings with coffee and no plans. For a while, I believed every word. We dated for about a year before getting married. My dad was skeptical from the start. He said, "Son, love makes men blind, but paperwork keeps them safe." That's why he paid for a lawyer to draw up a prenup. Melissa didn't love it, but she signed it, said she understood. Our marriage looked perfect from the outside. We bought a little white house in a quiet neighborhood, had a golden retriever named Max, hosted game nights, went to church on holidays. She posted photos online of us smiling, tagging them #blessed. The cracks didn't start until Dad got sick. That was about 10 months ago. When I told Melissa, she hugged me, made me promise we'd get through it together. And for the first few weeks, she really seemed like she meant it. She cooked for Dad, visited him with me, texted me reminders to stay hydrated like I was the one dying. Then around February, something shifted. She started staying late at client meetings. She stopped wanting to visit my dad's house on weekends, said the hospice smell made her sick. Her phone was always face down. I remember one night when I walked past the bathroom and heard her laughing softly, the kind of laugh that doesn't belong to the person you're married to anymore. When I asked who she was talking to, she said it was her sister. I believed her. Then little things. Missing jewelry. A cologne scent that wasn't mine on her jacket. Her suddenly working out at night, putting more effort into her appearance, and never letting me touch her phone again. I mentioned it to my friend Connor one evening when we were watching a Vols game at my place. He acted like I was being paranoid. Said Melissa was probably just stressed about my dad. Told me not to let grief mess with my head. He was lying through his teeth. But I didn't know that yet. Back then, all I knew was that I was watching my father fade away day by day, while the woman I thought was my anchor was slowly pulling away. I spent more time at the hospital, less at home, and she used that distance like oxygen. I can see it clearly now, the exact window she used to start building her new life. While I was out buying morphine patches for my dad, she was texting my best friend, whispering secrets into his phone. While I was crying in the parking lot, she was laughing on her sister's video calls, timing my father's decline like a financial countdown. That's who Melissa really is. But the thing is, she underestimated me. She thought I'd be too heartbroken, too naive, too busy burying my father to notice she was digging a grave for my marriage. What she doesn't know, what neither she nor Connor nor her sister realizes, is that I'm not planning to stop her. I'm going to let her think she's winning, because I want her to build her whole plan, brick by brick, right up until the moment she realizes I was the one handing her the bricks. For the next week after overhearing her, I acted normal. Fixed the gutters, ate dinner with her, slept next to her. She had no idea I knew, and that made every word out of her mouth sound fake. She'd text me at work, "How's your dad doing today?" And I'd reply, "Rough morning, but hanging in there." What I really wanted to type was, "Still alive," which means your countdown isn't over yet. But I didn't, because patience is what she wouldn't expect from me. 2 days later, I called Connor. Told him I needed to talk. About Melissa. I made my voice sound tired, shaky. He said he'd meet me at the Rusty Nail, a dive bar near his apartment. When I walked in, he was already there, nervous, avoiding eye contact. I told him I thought Melissa was pulling away, that I was worried she might be seeing someone. I said I didn't want to believe it, but I needed his opinion. He hesitated. His throat moved like he was trying to swallow a lie and couldn't get it down. Then he said, "Man, don't overthink this. You've got a lot going on. She loves you." The way he said it, too fast, too soft, told me everything. So I pushed him harder. I told him I loved her, but if she wanted out, I'd rather know. I said maybe I'd just file for divorce and get it over with. His face changed. The kind of panic people can't fake. He said, "You don't want to make that kind of decision right now, not with everything with your dad. Wait until you're thinking clearly." I almost laughed, because that's exactly what Melissa told Renee. Wait until after my dad died, after the inheritance hit. That night, I sat in my truck outside the bar for almost an hour, not crying, not shaking, just calculating. If they wanted to use my father's death as a payday, I'd give them their payday. I'd just make sure it never actually came. The next day, I drove to my dad's house in Chattanooga. He was having a good day, propped up in his recliner watching old westerns. I told him everything, every disgusting word I'd overheard, every lie, every plan. He didn't speak for a while, just stared at the TV, jaw tight. Then he said, "Well, son, she's made her move. Now it's your turn. You're your mother's boy. Patient and mean when you have to be." He called his lawyer right then. The man's name was Graham Linton. Old school, sharp, ruthless in a quiet way. Dad told him to restructure his estate immediately. By the next afternoon, Graham had drafted everything into an irrevocable trust. It meant the inheritance couldn't be touched, not even by a spouse, not even accidentally. Every penny would be tracked. If I died, it would go to Dad's chosen veterans charities, not to Melissa, not to anyone connected to her. Then Graham gave me advice I'll never forget. He said, "Henry, you can't outscream a liar. You outdocument them." So I started building my case. I installed a voice recorder app on my phone that activated whenever someone spoke. I saved every text, every call, every time she slipped up. And because I knew she was still sleeping with Connor, I started checking our phone bill online. 30 to 40 texts a day between them. Calls that accidentally happened during my hospital visits. It made me sick, but I wasn't after closure. I was after evidence. Then I did something I still don't feel guilty about. I told Connor I wanted to take Melissa on a short trip to reconnect before I made any big decisions. I said I was thinking of giving the marriage one last shot. He actually smiled, said I was being mature. All I was really doing was buying time. Time for my dad's paperwork to finalize. Time for Melissa to dig herself deeper. Time to make sure when everything fell apart, she'd have no legal way out. That night, she climbed into bed, wrapped her arms around me and said, "You've been so strong through all this, babe. Your dad would be proud." And I just stared at the ceiling, listening to the voice recorder on my nightstand quietly capturing every word. Because the next time she said my name, it was going to be in a courtroom. For days later, I found out that the affair with Connor wasn't even the worst of it. I was supposed to be at the hospital that day, but Dad's meds had been adjusted and he was resting comfortably, so I went home early. Melissa didn't know. When I walked in, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Then I heard her voice from the home office. She was on a video call again. I stopped in the hallway, just out of sight. On the laptop screen was Connor, shirtless, sitting in his dim apartment like some guilty secret come to life. Melissa was smiling at him. That same slow, lazy smile she used to give me when we first started dating. But then she said something that froze me. "He still doesn't suspect a thing. Once the money hits, I'll convince him to move it into our joint account. Then I'll file. But listen, we need to be careful about your name showing up anywhere. I don't want Henry's lawyer tracing anything back to you." Connor said something I couldn't hear. Melissa laughed softly and said, "Relax. By the time he figures out what happened, we'll be long gone." Then she said something else. Something that hit me harder than any confession of cheating. She said, "And when it's done, I'm paying off my mom's debts first. She deserves it after what Dad did." At first, I didn't understand what she meant. But then she kept talking to Connor like she was explaining why the timing mattered so much. Turns out, Melissa's mother, Janine, had racked up close to $80,000 in medical debt under Melissa's name. Her mother was being sued by a collections agency. Melissa had been secretly paying her legal bills from our joint account. And the inheritance? That wasn't about freedom or starting a new life. It was about saving her mother by robbing me blind. She wasn't marrying Connor for love. She was using him as a distraction, a body to fill space while she waited for my dad to die. I stood there in the hallway, shaking. Not from heartbreak this time, but from clarity. She didn't care about me, not even about Connor. This was never about passion or boredom or growing apart. This was about money and survival. I wasn't a husband anymore. I was a walking life insurance policy. And she'd built her entire plan on the assumption that I was too loyal, too trusting, too stupid to ever see it. That night, when she got home from meeting a client, I was sitting on the couch pretending to watch TV. She leaned down, kissed the top of my head, and said, "Missed you today." I smiled and said, "You won't have to miss me much longer." She laughed, not realizing that in my head, I was already writing her exit plan. The next morning, I drove back to Chattanooga, told Dad everything, every detail of what I'd overheard, including the debt, the fake affair, the plan to siphon the inheritance. He listened, jaw tight, and then said, "Son, she's playing chess. You're playing poker. Time to change games." We called his lawyer again. By that afternoon, Graham had drafted new trust provisions. Stronger, tighter, and meaner. The inheritance was locked inside an asset-protected account that could not be accessed, transferred, or merged with any marital fund under state law. If Melissa even tried to contest it, she'd trigger a clause that made her responsible for all legal fees, on both sides. I left Graham's office with 2 copies of the documents, one for my records, and one for the day I'd need to drop the hammer. When I got home that night, Melissa was in the kitchen making spaghetti, humming like she hadn't just confessed to financial fraud and emotional treason hours earlier. She smiled when she saw me, said, "You're home early." I looked her dead in the eye and said, "Yeah, just wanted to make sure you were still here." She tilted her head, confused. I smiled back, because I wasn't just her husband anymore. I was her executioner, and she'd handed me the evidence herself. After the laptop moment, after the debt and the plan and the cheap practicality of it all, I realized I had to stop being a man who reacts. My dad taught me that. He always said, "Don't swing until you can't miss." So I started building something that wouldn't miss. First thing, evidence. I already had a recorder running on my nightstand. I bought a secondary digital voice recorder and hid it in the living room. I set up a cheap motion camera in the office that only recorded when there was movement. I installed 2 password-protected backups to a cloud drive under a burner email no one would trace to me. Every text, every image, every time Melissa used the word inheritance or joint went into that folder. I started printing emails, stamping timestamps, saving metadata. I treated it like inventory for war. Second thing, legal armor. My dad and his lawyer, Graham, rewired everything. The trust was already irrevocable. Now it had poison. The trust included a clawback clause. Any challenge to the trust by someone inside my household would trigger a penalty that assigned legal fees to the challenger. The lawyer added a sentence that made any claim based on alleged commingling jump through absurd hoops. Proof burden heavier than evidence usually demands. It was ugly and precise and exactly the sort of thing that keeps predators from sniffing around a carcass. Third thing, control of the narrative. I changed our joint account splits. I moved what I could legally move into accounts in my name only. I did it cleanly, accountant-approved, traceable. I photographed every piece of furniture, every painting, every tool I'd owned before the marriage. I compiled bank statements going back years to show what was mine. I listed witnesses who could attest to who bought what, when. Documentation was dull. But dull is lethal when you have a liar. Fourth thing, bait. This one felt dirty, but my dad had said, "Let them hang themselves." I told Connor I wanted to try to save the marriage. I suggested a weekend getaway. One last attempt to work things out. Connor sucked the bait in. He wanted Melissa. He wanted his fantasy. He didn't want trouble. He wanted us to keep being dumb, easy targets because the easier the target, the less likely it fights back. But I didn't stop at Connor. I started letting Melissa let herself be visible. I didn't corner her. I didn't shout. I fed her opportunities to talk about timelines, about refinancing the house, about paying down debt from my dad's money. She obliged. She mentioned Janine's medical debts in the same breath as an offhand remark about a condo in New Mexico. Every casual slip turned into a printed page with a timestamp. Fifth thing, leverage. Graham and I drafted a postnuptial agreement framed as a formality required by the trust administrators. It was iron plain. The postnuptial confirmed in clear, plain English that any funds from the trust were my separate property and could not be touched. I told Melissa the trust administrator wanted the documentation to prevent probate confusion. She agreed to meet the lawyer because she thought signing kept the money in play. She put her initials on the dotted line, not knowing she was cutting her own rope. I also looped in a family ally. My uncle, Christian, a straight-talking man who had always liked me more than Melissa, quietly agreed to be a witness, to corroborate any stories about Melissa's behavior at get-togethers, and to speak at deposition if needed. I asked him not to say anything to the wider family yet. He promised. He was furious when he heard what she'd been doing, and that anger would be useful later. Finally, I prepared for the fallout. I packed a bag, set aside paperwork, found a hotel room I could crash in when I had to get away. I booked a consultation with a divorce attorney who specialized in cruelty cases and financial maneuvering. I wanted someone who knew the courthouse judge like a neighbor knows a mailbox. We rehearsed the filings, the evidence chain, which recordings to play first to maximize legal and reputational damage. We timed it so the legal strike would land when probate cleared and the trust funds were active, but also when Melissa felt safest. The plan wasn't pretty. It was meticulous. It required coldness I sometimes tasted and regretted. But this wasn't only about money anymore. It was about the way she'd counted my father's breaths like a metronome for her departure. It was about Connor, who'd pretended to be my friend for 14 years. It was about the principle of not letting a dying man's life be used as a timetable for greed. My dad told me once, when I was a kid, if someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Melissa had shown me. Connor had shown me. Now they were in the middle of their play, and I had pieces on the board that made escape impossible. There's one more move left before the curtain falls. I didn't know how it would feel when I pulled it. I only knew it would be precise. The plan was airtight. I had the postnup ready, the trust sealed, and every lie cataloged. But life, or maybe karma, decided that wasn't enough. 2 days before Dad passed, I got a call that changed everything. It was from Renee, Melissa's sister, the one she'd confided in about the whole scheme. Her voice was trembling. She said, "Henry, I need to tell you something before it's too late." At first, I thought she was going to confess out of guilt. Maybe she couldn't live with what Melissa was doing. But what she said next dropped a bomb in the middle of everything. She said, "Melissa isn't the only one planning something. Connor came to me last week. Turns out, Connor had figured out Melissa was never planning to actually be with him. He found messages between Melissa and Janine, her mother, where they were laughing about how gullible he was. They called him the decoy. He wasn't even part of the real plan anymore. Renee said Connor was furious, that he told her he was going to turn the tables, that he was done being used. He told her he was going to get to me first. He wanted to make things right. Except, his idea of making things right wasn't confessing. It was blackmail. Renee said Connor had screenshots, 2 photos, texts, messages, all the same ones I already had, but edited to make it look like I was the one having an affair. He was planning to use them to extort me into splitting the inheritance with him, claiming he'd blow up my marriage otherwise. But here's the kicker. Melissa already knew. Renee said Melissa had told her that if Connor tried anything, she'd take care of it. When Renee asked what that meant, Melissa said, "Connor doesn't realize I've got enough dirt on him to ruin his life. He'll stay quiet." So now all 3 of them were circling each other, each convinced they were the smartest in the room. But what none of them realized was that I already had every piece of evidence they were all trying to use against each other. I thanked Renee, told her not to say a word to anyone, and hung up. That night I couldn't sleep. Dad was unconscious in his hospital bed, breathing shallowly. Melissa was pretending to cry quietly in the corner, scrolling on her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. She didn't know I'd already transferred my recordings, documents, and messages into a secure drive that my lawyer and Graham both had access to. If anything happened to me, accident, suicide, whatever, it would all go public. The next morning, Dad passed. Melissa held my shoulder while I cried. She looked like a grieving wife, her eyes glassy, her hand soft on my back. But I knew what she was thinking. The money was finally coming. 3 days later, she texted Connor, "It's time." I know because I watched it appear on her phone from the hidden camera feed. She didn't know Connor had already tried to meet with me through Renee. And she didn't know that when Connor showed up at the lawyer's office that Friday, I was already there, sitting in the corner, waiting. He froze when he saw me. I didn't say a word. Graham slid a folder across the table toward him. Inside were copies of every message, including the ones he'd tried to edit. Unedited versions. Date-stamped. Verified. Connor didn't say a thing. His face went white. He stood up and left without even closing the folder. That was the day I realized something chilling. Melissa hadn't just betrayed me. She'd infected everyone around her. She'd built a trap so intricate that even her co-conspirators thought they were in control. But in reality, they were all tangled in each other's lies. And I was the only one holding the scissors. It would have been easier to believe Melissa was just greedy, that all of this came from money or boredom or midlife panic. But the truth that came out later was colder. Way darker. After Dad's funeral, I went through her old laptop. It was the one she'd stopped using after I accidentally spilled coffee on it months ago. Except I'd only fried the keyboard, not the hard drive. Graham's tech guy recovered everything. And what I found made my blood go still. There were emails between Melissa and her mother, Janine, going back 2 years before Dad's diagnosis. 2 years. Before cancer. Before inheritance talk. Before any of this. They were already planning it. It started small, discussions about stability and leverage. Then lines like, "If you play it right, he'll never suspect. Make sure he keeps everything in his name. That way, when he dies, the assets are free. Don't forget to keep him comfortable, sweetie. Grieving men are pliable." She'd written, "Dad's probably dying soon anyway. Once he goes, Henry will have everything." She wasn't talking about my dad. She was talking about hers. I kept reading. Turns out Janine had lost everything years ago when her husband, Melissa's father, gambled away their savings. He died of a stroke 2 months after the bankruptcy. Janine's bitterness was bottomless. She'd raised Melissa to believe that love without money was weakness, that every relationship was an investment, and you collect when the time is right. In one email, Janine wrote, "You deserve to have what men have: security, not heartbreak. Never love a man who can't give you an exit plan." And Melissa replied, "Don't worry, Mom. I found mine." That was 2 weeks before we got engaged. She targeted me from the start. The coincidental meeting at that cookout? She'd known I was there. My coworker had posted a photo that morning tagging me. She followed the tag, showed up, and bumped into me. The fake sweetness, the way she mirrored my interests, the humble girl next door routine, all deliberate. She told her mother she'd found a stable one with family assets. And when Dad got sick, she didn't see tragedy. She saw timing. Every hug, every tear at the hospital, every moment she rubbed my back and whispered, "We'll get through this." All of it was theater. Even the affair with Connor had a purpose. He wasn't passion. He was leverage, someone to make me emotional enough to misstep, to push me toward joint finances. She'd told her mother, "If he thinks he's losing me, he'll try to prove he's committed. That's when he'll merge the money." It was a psychological chess match. She didn't just want to take half. She wanted me to hand it to her, to feel like it was my choice. And the most haunting part? In one of her drafts, never sent, she wrote, "When Frank dies, Henry will finally be free. That's when I'll make my move. That's when I'll stop pretending. Stop pretending. Not leave. Not divorce. Stop pretending." There was no version of this where I survived her emotionally intact. She was never planning to share a life, only to extract one. It wasn't greed. It was ideology. Her mother had taught her that the only way to win was to hollow a man out and make him believe it was his idea. And that's what she'd done, until I decided to stop playing by her rules. Because by the time I read that last email, the divorce papers were already printed. And Melissa's countdown had just hit 0. Monday morning came quiet and gray. I hadn't slept more than an hour. My hands were steady anyway. At 9 a.m., I met my attorney in her office. We filed for divorce. Grounds: adultery and attempted financial fraud. I left a folder so thick it could have brained someone: recordings, screenshots, emails, the recovered laptop drive, the postnup, everything. By 9:45, the clerk stamped the paperwork. By 2 o'clock, a process server walked into Melissa's design studio and handed her the envelope. I know because my attorney texted the confirmation. Served. I was sitting in our kitchen when she came home. She still had the envelope in her hand, the corners crushed where she'd been gripping it. Her eyes were wide, makeup streaked. "Henry, what is this?" she said, voice breaking. I told her it was the end of her performance. She tried to talk, spinning through excuses so fast they tripped over each other. "You misunderstood. I was confused. I still love you." So I played her the audio from the day she told her sister the plan. After Frank dies, after the inheritance clears, I'll take my half and disappear. Her own voice filled the room, cold and clean. She sank into a chair. Where did you get that? I said. Right under your nose. You've been recorded since July. She looked like someone had yanked her spine out. Then she started crying, shaking, saying she'd been manipulated by her mom, by Connor, that she never really meant it. I told her the truth, that I'd read her emails, that I knew she'd targeted me long before she ever met me, that she'd written stop pretending like I was an audition she'd nailed. She went silent, just stared at the wall. Then she said quietly, "You can't prove half of that." I slid the flash drive across the table. It's already been proven. Lawyer has copies. So does the trust administrator. You're finished. Her next move was desperation. She asked how much I'd give her to go away quietly. I told her, nothing. The prenup and postnup say exactly what you get. Your car, your clothes, your half of the furniture. That's it. She screamed then, called me heartless, told me I'd regret it, that she could still ruin me online. So I reminded her of the clause. If she made any false claims or contested anything, she'd be responsible for all legal fees, both sides. I told her one lie would bankrupt her faster than her mother's hospital bills. She shut up after that. I walked upstairs, packed a duffel bag, and before I left, I told her I wanted her out by Friday. You can stay with Renee, I said. Maybe she'll teach you what love actually looks like. I didn't slam the door. I didn't yell. I just left. Then I drove straight to Connor's apartment. He opened the door looking like he hadn't slept either. He tried to say something, but I cut him off and showed him Melissa's emails to her mother, the ones calling him a useful idiot. He read them slowly. His face went pale. He said, "She said she loved me." I said, "She said that to me too. Ask her what she meant." I left him sitting there, staring at the printouts like they were written in blood. By the end of the week, Melissa was gone. She left her keys on the counter and drove off in silence. I changed the locks that night. The divorce moved fast. The postnup and recordings made it bulletproof. Her lawyer tried to posture at first, but when Graham sent over the email archive, they folded in 2 days. She got her car, a few boxes, and a reputation that won't wash off in this town. Connor moved to Atlanta. Renee blocked her number. Even Janine stopped picking up her calls after creditors started freezing her accounts. The day the final decree came through, I drove to Dad's grave. I told him the trust was safe. His money was helping the veterans charity he loved. I told him Melissa got nothing, not a cent. Then I sat there a long time, just listening to the wind cut across the hill. It didn't feel like triumph. It felt like finishing a fight you didn't start but couldn't walk away from. Melissa once said to me, "Love without money is weakness." I guess she was right about one thing: love without honesty is death. When I walked away from that grave, I felt lighter. Not happy, not proud, just clean. I got in my truck, turned the key, and whispered to myself, "Dad." She played chess. I played checkmate.